It's Monday at 8 p.m., so you know what time it is. This just in right here on Facebook Live is that sports show where we discuss all of those topical issues locally, regionally, and internationally. And of course, the big sporting news around the world. You've seen protests gripping the US and spreading globally in terms of protests against police brutality. And tonight we want to really zero in on sport and race. We touched on it a bit last week, but it has really come to the forefront this week. So in looking at sport and its relationship with race, we want to zero in on Black athletes and the role, if any, that Black athletes have to play in protests against racism and police brutality. I'm Marsha Boyce, and joining me again tonight, our usual gang, we have Neil Hoyt and, of course, Justin Marvel. Justin, you can get things going for us tonight.
Good night, everyone. Before I get going on the topic at hand, I just want to remind people these are major sweeping issues that we know. Social injustice, and racism. But before I go further, I also want to say that I don't want us to forget the lives lost or the people impacted, the individuals, because too often in the sweeping narrative, we forget that families are impacted, human beings are impacted, and for every life lost, you are losing a child is losing a parent is losing a child, a family is losing a breadwinner, a community is losing a leader. So with that said, I've watched enough programs to realize that some of the names are getting lost. So I just wanted Marsha and Neil to touch back on some of the names. We know this weekend or last week, George Floyd's unfortunate murder. But I don't want us to forget people like Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Oscar Grant, Eric Garner, Philando Castile, Samuel DuBose, Sandra Bland, that is, or Walter Scott. These are just some of the names that have been, lost. Some of the lives have been taken through the unfortunate situation of social injustice. Now let me divert back to the topic at hand, which is, do Black athletes have inherent responsibility to publicly speak out against racism? Neil and I touched on this matter briefly as it related to the last dance of Michael Jordan with Harvey Gantt. And my position is even stronger now. I believe most definitely yes, that athletes do have a responsibility to speak out. And there are a whole host of reasons why I believe this. First and most importantly, you are not an athlete first and foremost. First and foremost, you're a Black man. And we can't get away from that. We need to understand that as rich as successful you are, no matter how prominent you are in society as a Black athlete, or a Black entertainer, or Black celebrity, you are a Black man first and foremost. And I can safely say that because somebody like LeBron James 3 years ago found that out personally. I'm not sure if you all remember, but even before he became a Los Angeles Laker, he has a home in Los Angeles. And his front gate was vandalized, spray painted with the N-word. Obviously, I won't say that on this program, but the N-word was spray painted on his front gate. And if somebody as popular, as huge, as successful as LeBron James can face such a horrific act, then as I always say, matters like this will always land on your doorstep, no matter who you are. And as a Black man, you owe it to your community, particularly those. Sorry, I'm a loss of words because, this is very personal for me. But as you know, these Black athletes in sports such as the NBA and the NFL make so much money, and they reach out to the same Black people or their own Black people asking for people to come to their games, for people to buy their jerseys, for people to endorse their brands, to buy their shoes. And just in that point alone, you're asking your community to support you in, to make you successful, to make you rich, to make you known. And if you're doing that, then I believe it is your responsibility then to represent the same people you ask to support you. And in that same vein, Marsha and Neil, there's a line that we all know: to whom much is given, much is expected, or much is deserved. And also another famous Martin Luther King quote: injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I say that to say, as a Black athlete, a Black entertainer, a Black celebrity, when you get the mileage you have the power you have the reach that you have, there are activists, there are normal Black people who have to deal with things that even if you don't have to deal with, they will love the reach, the power, the mileage that you have. And while people may say, well, yes, you're good at your sport, or just because you are good at something doesn't mean that you should be given the responsibility to speak out or the responsibility to be the face of something. You have that reach for a reason. And I believe it is your responsibility to have that reach to represent the people who have given you that reach, that given that power, that given you that status. It is only fair that if you, as I said before, if you're asking these people for their support, then it is only, right upon you to give back that same support.
So, Justin, I just want to get Neil's position on this initial question. In terms of Neil, do you think Black athletes have a role to play in that racism fight against police brutality, fight against social injustice?
So, when we watched The Last Dance, and Justin knows my stance on this, if we are talking about social responsibility in terms of speaking out for a wide variety of social injustices, I would say that a Black athlete is not necessarily responsible for saying something, right? However, I think when it comes to racism, which infringes on your basic human right, and the injustices, police brutality, and those types of things that are derivative of racism, as Justin said, you have a right and a responsibility to do it. I think that what happened last week to George Floyd is glaring as to where we are now. So I know a lot about American history and politics and certain things that would have happened in their past. And 100 years ago in Tulsa, there was a massacre on Black Wall Street, where in Greenwood, you had a whole community of wealthy Black people just living out their lives, homeowners, shop owners, that kind of thing. And because of an incident as simple as stepping on someone's toe, a Black man stepped on a white woman's toe, she said that she was assaulted, or rather she said that the Black man stepped on his toe, and that was interpreted into she was assaulted by a Black man. And that caused as many as 300 that night. 300 Black people to be massacred that night. And Greenwood, which was the Black Hollywood, Black Wall Street, Black Wall Street to be burned to the ground. Now that was 100 years ago. I watched the news over the last week, and I've seen a Black man killed unnecessarily for something as an alleged forgery. And you see the riots, you see the burnings, you see, the looting, the vandalism, the violence. And it leaves me wondering, before I used to say that the race relations right now in the United States and the world is the best they've ever been in human history. But having what I've seen over the past 3 years, 5 years, the last week, it leaves me saying that I don't see how you as a Black person, forget Black athlete, I don't see how you can remain quiet right now. As a Black athlete, definitely you have you literally have no reason not to speak out and be responsible in leading your community in saying something, simply because, as Justin likes to point out, without your forebearers and without certain, we talk about privileges and rights. Now, there's a
Right.
black privilege. There's a black privilege.
So sorry to cross you. I wanted to quit that in quickly so you can continue on. What you're about to talk about, and this is one thing I should have gotten in quite quickly. The privileges or the freedoms that we enjoy now, we must understand that people before us fought for those, sacrificed for those, and died for those. And that is the real reason why, as a black man, regardless of whether you're an athlete, a celebrity, a leader, a mason, a carpenter, you have to speak up. People fought, people died. And especially as athletes, when you are in the position that you are in, the luxuries that you have, the riches and the things that you've been afforded, there are black athletes before you that had to sacrifice to get these things or make the way possible for you. Now imagine if someone like Muhammad Ali or Jackie Robinson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Russell, Tommy Smith, another man missing John Carlos from the 1968 Olympics. Imagine if those people had not spoken out. Imagine if those people did not take a stance as black athletes. Where would our black athletes be today to be able to get the earning and the living that they have now? So sorry, Neil, you could go ahead. I want to get that point in quickly.
That's no problem. Yeah, so I mean, even though I could understand fear, I could understand doubt, I can understand safety of family and well-being. But I think when you refuse to speak up because you're afraid that you won't sell sneakers or that your popularity will be diminished or your sport stock as an athlete will drop and you would lose favor in your business ventures or in your sporting endeavors. I literally spent the entire day today and part of yesterday trying to figure out, knowing that we were going to talk on this topic, trying to see how I can, as I like to play devil's advocate, I like to defend or whatever. I literally I can't see how you don't say anything now as a black athlete, as a black entertainer, as a black, anyone with a voice should say something right now. And I don't know what else to say on that without getting too heavy-handed or serious.
So then a question I want to pose to you both. Justin, I'm going to start with you. We're saying that black athletes role to play. But my question is, what does this role look like? Because it is okay to say, okay, you have a role to play, but how should this role manifest itself? How should it play out? Because you have a situation where, separate and apart from losing favor or whatever, if you go using the best example you can think about in Colin Kaepernick, you can lose effectively your way of life. And if sport is the only thing you know, if you lose that by speaking out and then subsequently being blackballed, etc., and you lose your only means of income, your families are out there, essentially on the breadline. How then should this role manifest itself? When we've moved beyond now losing popularity and so forth, you might lose your very sole means of income.
I don't want to tell an athlete, celebrity, entertainer, whatever you have, I don't want to tell them how they should do or how they should step up in this situation. Everyone to each his own and to whoever feels comfortable in doing what. But as we all discuss, even off this show, personally, we know nothing changes in the comfort zone. And if it means losing away your means of living, if it means losing income, I have to ask then, isn't the outcome worth it? We've seen Colin Kaepernick lose his way or his means of income. Thankfully, we subsequently found out that Colin Kaepernick has been regaining some sort of money because of his endorsement with Nike. It still doesn't make up for the amount of money he's lost in salary because he still had that endorsement all well. but that was the sacrifice he was willing to make. And I want to say that change, improvement, the way forward does not come without sacrifice. Muhammad Ali was imprisoned. I don't know what Jackie Robinson would have had to sacrifice, but he had to make sacrifices. The names I called before all had to make sacrifices, and I'm quite sure that they had losses along the way. Things just can't change unless we remain the same, because we've seen how we remain the same, or we've done things the same way, and they have not changed. And I point to the same way Kaepernick knelt during the national anthem, and people told him, well, this was not the way to protest because it's disrespecting the military, it's disrespecting the flag, it's disrespecting the anthem. And Cap said, no, I'm not doing this to disrespect any of those things. I am doing this to bring about awareness to these social injustices. And he paid the price. Now, I'm not telling these athletes, celebrities, entertainers that everyone has to go and pay the ultimate price. But again, as I said at the top, or just a couple minutes ago, people made even bigger sacrifices for you. And along the way, as I said, I don't know what that is going to entail. I don't know what that looks like. But you have a situation, somebody that as young as Jaylen Brown, who's 23, guard forward for the Boston Celtics. He drove, I want to say, it was 15 hours, Marsha?
15 hours, yeah.
From Boston to Atlanta to lead peaceful protests. Now, not everybody, not every athlete is going to be in a position to do such. But if a 23-year-old can put that on his shoulders, and again, I'm not asking everybody to take on the huge burden of this, but if a 23-year-old can do this, then simple things of going to your social media account and saying enough is enough, this will not stand, justice for all, boycott. I'm not sure if you saw Marsha, but I think within the film and entertainment industries, there's going to be a blackout
yeah.
going forward.
June 2nd.
And these are the sort of things that are needed to move this. I hate to use the term or the terminology, but these are the sort of things that we need to move this conversation forward. I don't know how you feel, Neil.
So I actually, we disagree. I actually think I can tell people how to what is in this. You see, you called Jackie Robinson, Muhammad Ali, Bill Russell, you called a lot of greats that had to speak up in a time where there wasn't the certain platforms that they have now. There wasn't a certain wealth, and there wasn't a certain there was a certain resistance with how they can lend their support. So they had to get radical. In 2020, it is quite simple, right? Something as simple as you supplying water and clothing like hoodies or whatever for the protesters. Something as simple as you posting bail for those that have been arrested while protesting and not doing violent, destructive things, right? Things like, as Justin mentioned, going to your social media, things like having food organized for organized protests, things like making sure, because this is a point I want to, is that I hope people don't lose sight of what is the most important thing here. Yes, a goal is to seek justice for George Floyd and to get the officers that have perpetrated the murder on George Floyd to be arrested and to ultimately be convicted. But I think that the ultimate goal is to see the system change from the bottom up, because yes, George Floyd's family and George Floyd will get their justice, but this is as we've seen time and time again, it keeps happening. It just doesn't stop. So it is more than just seeking justice for one person, for two people, for three people. It is about changing the way police interact with the Black person, and also how the systematic racism can be changed. So as a celebrity, things like that, things like, as Justin hates to say, moving the conversation forward, checking in with the powers that be and the leaders of the Black community to make sure that the protests and the voices are still heard, making sure that you can either donate, you can either contribute, or you can personally lend your voice and support within those movements and protests, calling for peace, making sure that the protests are peaceful, you know, ensuring. And the thing about it is, I don't even think you would lose a lot by donating water, by
I don't.
donating food.
That's the thing, Neil. Right now, I don't think you're going to lose anything
You don't, you
because,
can't.
unlike previous times when we grew up, or even before us, this is no. I don't want to use the word popular, but it seems to support this, you'll be coming out on the right side of history. So you don't really. I don't foresee you losing a lot
But
to
but
come out.
but to cross you, though, no, that is something I am fearful of because it is trendy and because coming out against it is going to be a bad look for you and your business. I find a lot of people may be coming out disingenuous,
I agree.
disingenuously supporting the movement simply because they don't want their product or business or brand to be diminished.
Oh, I have one particular entity to tackle about that, but I know Marsha will deal with that later on. So, but
that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. We know about that. But the point I'm trying to make is that if you've seen the video of George Floyd, and normally I don't support the sharing and documenting and watching of those kinds of things, right? Out of respect for the person that had died and the family. But I encourage everyone to watch every last minute of that video and listen to it with volume. And after listening to it and listening to all the accompanying video of it, the surveillance video, the all of the cameras, all of the angles you can find of that incident, I want you to watch it. And if as a Black person, as a celebrity, as a person with money, you still feel you to say or do anything about it, then I don't know what to say. I don't know.
I want to ask you, Marsha, before you go. Actually, Marsha, I have I was a bit taken back. In that I didn't anticipate George Floyd's murder to have the response that it's had, because we've seen situations, we've seen the happenings going on back and forth, because as we know, this is not one isolated incident. And I know we had a conversation before, Marsha, but why do you feel that this has happened? Why do you feel that this has gotten the response and backlash that we've seen with all the riots all across the world, or sorry, all across the United States, should I say? Well,
there are protests globally in support of, you've seen protests in the UK, for example, and so forth. For me, I think, looking at it at the very surface level, because I haven't really, a lot of these things will come to light in retrospect when, you know, you sat down, fully analyze some of the things that have happened. For me, two of the key things in terms of the outpouring in support, one, it's a culmination of everything that has gone before it. You know, we always talk about the last straw that broke the camel back. Not only is this another in a series of incidents, but you have, you know, a couple of incidents that became very public in a very short space of time, in almost like a 2 week period. There were 3 different incidents, bam, 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 bam. So you have that crescendo of feeling, and 2, indirectly coronavirus, because there's nothing else going on. Now, we are all at home consuming media, particularly social media. So there are some who might have missed this, you know, if they were going about their daily life, caught up in work, etc., 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 etc. But because of you, particularly in the US, where you have states that are still on relative shutdown or some sort of restrictions, you have more people at home consuming media. And if you've been consuming media over the past couple of months, you will find, for me, you have that peak, that crescendo of, okay, this is enough now, and everything will spill over. But to tackle you two on, I guess, a follow-up question that I had in terms of the role, quote unquote, that Black athletes should play, how much is enough? Because you see the situation where, okay, you know, we can make a lot of suggestions to the cause, etc., etc., etc. But you lend your voice to the cause and you're met with the criticism. Is that all? Or you gave $10,000. Oh, you made millions. You could afford to give more than $10,000. $10,000 is not enough. So at each stage, particularly as, you know, a high-profile Black athlete, no matter what you do, you open up yours. It might not seem like enough. And added to that, must what you do be public? Because we live in an age where, okay, could have donated $100,000 to the cause. But unless that is publicized, it seems as if, okay, nothing is happening. So one, how much is enough? And two, must everything be public?
All right, let me go first.
Yeah.
Yes, I won't go first. So this is exactly why Justin and I, we had a huge argument during the last dance about this, right? Where Michael Jordan, he did give monetary donations to Harvey Gantt, even though he did not publicly come out and lend his likeness toward Harvey Gantt's campaign back in 1990, 91, 89, something like that. Anyhow, doesn't matter. So going back to your question, Marsha, I think whatever you can give, whatever you are comfortable to give, whatever you feel within your heart you can give, do it. If you feel that you can literally get on a plane and go and support, or drive like Jaylen Brown all the way down to an epicenter to protest and to give your voice, do that. If you have a huge social media following and you want to encourage the conversation and to keep the movement moving forward peacefully, do that. If you have money and resources to donate water and food and clothing and that kind of thing, do that. If you have money that you can just donate, do that. Now, I think this is not the time for us to worry about the optics of it, about it being showcased or not. It is not about the optics. It's not about a trend. It's about keeping the movement peacefully moving forward to evoke real, tangible change. Because at the end of the day, if I give $10,000 and I'm a billionaire, it doesn't matter. That $10,000 could do a lot, right? Whether I want to give more or want to give less, that's not the point. But the point is that be consistent in giving. Whether you give 10,000 here and then later down the road you give like your voice on social media, or you give an interview, or you go to a protest, or you just check in with the community leaders to make sure that the conversation is still being had. Whatever you can give, just give. Just lend your voice and support. It's not the time to say, oh, I just let everybody know that I give $10,000 because I don't want them to come for me, or I say in this statement because I don't want people to see me as not caring or being tone deaf to the. This is quite literally, this is not against anyone. This is against an institution. This is against a mentality. Racism is disgusting and it needs to be stamped out, and it has caused a system where millions of people are persecuted and ostracized daily. So this is not about the optics. And the second question you were saying, what was the second question again? Just remind me.
No, the first question is how much is enough, and the second one in terms of it being public.
Right. So I think I covered both of them. Give what you can and just be consistent in giving something, anything. T-shirts, you can give money, you can give water, food, you can give whatever you can give, right? Whether you spark change or not, give something, give anything, give consistently, keep the conversation moving forward. And it doesn't have to be public. It doesn't have to, it can be, however you want to handle it. The fact of the matter is, do it.
I'm going to piggyback off of Neil's comments and go even further. Whatever you can do until we are in a position where we can say that we are done. We have gone to a point where we feel comfortable, wherever that is. But for as long as you're alive, for whatever you can do it. As Neil said, what it means, giving water, donating shirts, giving money behind the scenes, or just, you'll be surprised, but in certain cases, maybe giving $50,000 does not equate to you just walking down the road and holding somebody's hand. You may see a child on the road or somebody, a young kid on the road who says, I want to protest, or I want to put my face to this, or I want to be out there, but I'm afraid. And you'll be surprised that just an athlete holding their hand and walking down the road with them means so much more than giving $50,000. Whatever you can do for however long it takes is my answer to you, Marsha. It doesn't have to be public. It doesn't have to be boastful, but it's whatever you can do for however long it takes.
Hold on a second, Marsha. Before you go on, I just want to make mention of Denzel Washington last week. He was driving down the road and he saw a homeless man being arrested, right? Well, the officers were trying to arrest a homeless man and he was behaving erratically, right? Probably whatever his situation was, he was, he was not being compliant with the officers. Denzel Washington stood in. He literally stopped his car, got out, gave the man some mask, and talked him down to being detained and arrested so that he can de-escalate the situation, right? Now, obviously, people recorded it, sent it into TMZ and whomever and whatever. But that is exactly what we were talking about, that to go on what Justin just said. It doesn't have to be money. It doesn't have to be water, whatever you can give. Something as simple as seeing an injustice and saying, yo, there's a black brother there, so let me at least go and ask a question.
Right.
Right?
You don't have to be like, you don't have to be Jalen Brown with a mic in your hand. You just do whatever you can for however long it takes.
Yeah.
Now, for those who might be just joining us here on this Just In, tonight we're shining the spotlight on sport and race. Specifically in this first half of the show, the role that Black athletes can play in the fight against racial injustice, social injustice, and police brutality. For me personally, where I sit, I think I kind of straddle, I guess somebody might accuse me of being on the fence. While I believe athletes, particularly Black athletes, have a role to play, that decision has to be at the level of the individual and what they stand to gain or lose. Because I am not going to sit here and say, knowing full well that if you do X, Y, Z, you might lose your job and lose your source of income for the rest of your life. Marsha Boyce, can't sit here and say, you should be out there on the front line doing X, doing Y, doing that. At the end of the day, for me, it has to be a personal decision. And you see, in terms of some of the athletes you're seeing, young Coco Gauff is doing some very good work with, in the tennis community. She's had her viral video. She's working with New Balance, etc. Justin, you mentioned Jalen Brown. You have Udonis Haslem. Even, Chris Gayle, as a Caribbean cricketer, speaking out about certain things using his social media platforms. Paul Pogba, the entire Liverpool squad, they had a coordinated social media campaign pushing, uniting Black Lives Matter, etc., where the entire squad released the same message across their social media at the same time. As I think about this, for the athlete who does indeed want to play a role and don't know where to start, putting on another hat I tend to have as it relates to working with athletes, sport communication, sport marketing, personal branding, etc. Some of the suggestions I would have link closely, Neil, to what you were saying, where you could donate in terms of, because I made some notes, using your platforms, visibility, whether that is in the mainstream media, social media, etc. Activism, whether you're the Jalen Browns who can drive down and lead a protest, whether you're the person who can organize a social media campaign, etc. Support in terms of funding, donations, whether that is in cash, in kind, as you guys mentioned, if you could buy a case of water, if you can support bail funds. There are a lot of Black community organizations that are on the ground working and need financial support. Added to that now, because you remember this is a long game. This is not a one-off.
This ain't happening. This ain't done in a time soon.
So then as an athlete, what companies do you align yourself with? What partnerships do you engage with? Which companies do you take endorsements from? You can make your message that way. Who do you take money from? Are these people supportive of your community? Offering mentorship programs and even one-on-one mentorship. But for me, a big point, and this will take us into the next phase of our discussion, accountability. Holding your friends accountable, holding your family members accountable, your political leaders, your community leaders. Immediately, though, holding your teams, leagues, and organizations accountable.
Before you go on, just one last thing, Marsha, before you get into that. And I understand what you're saying, being a personal choice. But I just want to stress that whether you decide to sit on from behind the scenes and do what you want, or are you at the front, you have to do something. And I will say that you have to do something for one rare reason. Just remember, people like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. It is unfair. Let me quickly say it is unfair for me to say that if you are, just because you're an athlete or just because you are good at something in entertainment or you're an athlete, you are expected to do something. But it's also not fair to be black in the United States. And people cannot even live at their own homes. People cannot sit down in their own cars. People cannot jog in their own neighborhoods.
Live in certain communities as rich people.
So I'm saying it may sound unfair to say that these expectations are expected of you as a black athlete, but at the same time, the people underneath you, your black community, it is not fair for them either. And there are just certain expectations that come with certain positions. Is it fair? No, but it's also not fair for black people on a whole.
All right, just really quickly, let me really quickly just add to that point, Marsha. In 2020, I feel that you don't have as much to lose, as you may lose part of your livelihood, but you're not going to lose your entire livelihood, because something as simple as donating money. You may not want to be one of these people to go on the front lines and, put your face out there and thing, especially when you know how the NFL is or whatever. You may be blackballed. Something as simple as privately donating money, water, food, whatever to the cause, right?
But
that to me, you're not losing anything. You're still playing. You're still making money. If you take $10,000 of your money and donate it, what? So what? I donated water. You can get rid of me because I donated water to a cause. Nah, I think that's the unique situation we found ourselves in, is that there's so many ways that you can give back and that you can support the cause without losing your livelihood or whatever.
So then, as I said, moving into the next stage for me, another thing athletes can do in addition to all you guys mentioned is holding their teams, leagues, and organizations accountable. And while we acknowledge, the role that black athletes have to play in this fight, what about the role of sport organizations, sport entities, sport teams, sport leagues? You're seeing the statements coming out from the NBA, the NFL, various organizations, individual teams like the Boston Celtics and so forth. Justin, I'm going to start with you. What role do you think organizations have to play?
I think even bigger than the black athletes themselves. Because while LeBron James has, probably close to 1 billion social media followers, he still does not have the power of combined sporting organizations. The responsibility that they have is even greater, because we see it at home where we always talk about having great social partners in companies. These companies, as I said before, are asking you, they get their money from you, from people in the community. Mm-hmm. They get you to come to games, to purchase memorabilia, to support, to come to the gate through TV rights money. All of their money comes from you. So then your responsibility are to the same people who pump their money to you. And that's because your sporting organization, your league, your team is based in the community. And that is why I have the utmost respect for the University of Minnesota. If there were 4 words that were said, the 4 most impactful words for me that were said for this week were the words coming from the president of the University of Minnesota, Joan Gable. She wrote a press release within days of the unfortunate incident. Sorry, let me not call it an unfortunate incident anymore. Within days of the murder of George Floyd, she sent out a press release distancing the university from the Minneapolis Police Department. Mm-hmm. And the 4 words that stood out to me, she said, "This will not stand. This will not stand." And after those words, she outlined the areas in which the university will be distancing themselves from the department. And that is basically to say, we do not agree, we do not support, we will not justify or condone the actions that the entire world saw on social media with the killing of George Floyd. And that puts pressure on the police department, because their mantle is to protect and serve. But you cannot protect and serve people who do not trust you, who do not deem you responsible enough to be behind you, to secure you. Now, I know you and I had a previous discussion about it, and people will say, well, it is easy for the University of Minnesota to make this decision because they have their own campus security. So, they can say, well, we really didn't need the police department to begin with anyway. But I also say that financially and other ways, they stood nothing to gain from making that statement also. Because when you look through, as much as university is a part of the Minnesota community, their campus is 68% white, only 5% black. Any potential backlash, just remember, they don't require or they don't need people to come through the turnstile. The money for Power 5 schools, and by mean Power 5 schools in within the Power 5 conferences, and they're within the Big Ten. Their money comes, as you know, from TV deals.
TV rights. Mm-hmm.
So they don't need the black community to come through their turnstile. And so far, and for those who don't know, Joan Gable is white, representing a predominantly white school. For her to take the open stance to say this will not stand because we stand with the members of the community. That was a powerful message. And I don't want to single out just University of Minnesota. We see people like white athletes and white celebrities, Tom Brady, Carson Wentz. Joe Burrow is somebody he didn't know the first overall pick in this year's NFL draft. He has been somebody who is very outspoken on issues of social injustice. You've seen the J.J. Watts, Steve Carell, and fellow comedian Seth Rogen. They have all come out against this and stood with their black brothers and black sisters in this fight. So I go back to say, sporting organizations, sporting leagues, teams have the power to force places like the Minnesota Police Department, Minneapolis Police Department, for lack of better words, to act right. And that takes me to the point I really want to get to. The NFL. Now, the NFL was, I think, Marsha can correct me if I'm wrong, the first pro sporting league to issue a statement American Pro League.
Right, I am not 100% sure. But I know for sure the NBA's statement came after the NFL's.
It don't matter if it was first, second, last. It don't matter. Get to your point. Get to the point, Justin. Cause I know what you're gonna say, and I completely 100% agree.
Right. The NFL. Sorry, I didn't hear you. I just cut out there, Justin O'Neill. But the NFL released a statement in support, basically, of the pain, the suffering that we in the black community have felt.
Quote, and the need for urgent action. Unquote.
It is the most disingenuous statement I have ever seen in my entire life. And they're just two words to say why. Colin Kaepernick. You blackballed the man who peacefully protested to raise awareness for these same issues. Who told you he was not disrespecting the flag? He was not disrespecting the anthem. He was not disrespecting the military. He was taking a knee during the anthem to raise awareness of these same issues of social injustice. You blackballed him and then turn around and have the gall to issue a release like that, calling for immediate action.
Sorry, an urgent need for action. I don't want to misquote them.
Sorry. An urgent need for action. I'm gonna let you and Neil.
While pledging their continued commitment to the cause.
So, if you are pledging continued commitment to the cause, why did you blackball the man who initially tried to raise awareness via peaceful protests to these same issues? Go ahead.
And to add to the Neil, just before you jump in, to add to the Colin Kaepernick point, you saw Peyton Thompson from the Jaguars came out today and said, but hold on, he called the NFL statement trash, his word, not mine, and saying that, issue was at its peak around 2016, etc. Both the vice president and the head coach came to them directly and said, do not kneel. it took the owner of the Jaguars, who is a minority in Shahid Khan, to say, you know what? No, that's not what we're going to do. Everybody is going to do it together. So you have a player here saying, like, we're not talking foolishness, because even then, this is not how this player wanna come to me and say, yo, do not do this thing. Had not for our minority owner, we would have been in the same boat. So how can you now release this statement talking about continued commitment and an urgent need for action?
And now, all of a sudden, now you understand your social responsibility to communities. All of a sudden, now. Sorry, Neil, go ahead.
Right. So let me start off by saying I don't agree with you, Justin, completely that an organization is more beholden onto a community than Black athletes, simply because they're faceless. And while you would like them to get involved in certain initiatives and certain community-based things and awareness, it is not their responsibility, because at the end of the day, they're a faceless organization owned by predominantly white Americans. It would be nice if they were to say something or to offer support, but I don't think that they have a more important role to play than the Black athlete. I think that an organization does have a responsibility to its community, however, and it does have a responsibility to issue statements to condemn or to make aware certain issues within a society, right? Not only is it a good look, but it is socially conscious and responsible, right? So I don't expect an organization to get out there and donate money or to donate tickets or to donate food and water, clothing, issue bail money. I don't expect that from an organization. To be quite frank, and I'm talking about leagues that are predominantly Black. I don't expect that from a league, right? Issue a statement.
Even when your league is 70% Black, just asking.
And it doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is that that is not their responsibility more so than the Black athlete. If they want to do it, then fine. If they want to release a press statement, that is fine. But I don't expect that from them more so than the Black athlete or Black community. No. Having said that, right? What you do not do opposite to that is that you do not condemn a man who was trying to peacefully make aware the injustices and police brutality going on for his community in his country, right? You don't condemn, you don't have meetings saying that, you know, we can do this, we can do that. If you do it, you can get fined. You don't issue statements saying that owners will condemn. You don't. It is one thing not to support, and it is another thing to outright snuff the voice. And that is what the NFL did.
Because remember, Neil, they have outlawed protesting during the anthem. You can no longer kneel. You can no longer stay in your thing. You will have to stand
to be there, right? Because I remember
be out there in public and stand for the national anthem.
I remember one of the solutions was to stay in the locker room during the national anthem if they were not going to think. And they said any player that stays in the locker room will be suspended. Now, again, if you as an organization or a league or whomever you are as an entity, decide you do not want to support and you just want to give a press statement, that is fine. That is all right.
Can I jump in there, Neil, a second?
Go ahead.
Why a press statement? What does a statement solve? What does a statement do?
Because at the end of the day, an entity, it's a brand. And this is one of those times where you do not want to come out on the road. You don't want to come out as tone deaf or insensitive. And right now, the bare minimum anyone can do, whether you're Black, white, or whomever, is to issue a press statement condemning the actions continually happening in the United States.
Isn't that then posturing?
Yes, it is. But that's the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that this is not about entities. This is This is not about organizations. It's not about teams. It's not about leagues. It's about the people, right? Policy is made from the people. Change is made with the people, right? The Toronto Raptors ain't getting vote. Well, don't let me use Toronto Raptors. The Dallas Mavericks are not going to lead the change necessary in America. They may assist it, or they may not. Regardless, if they decide not to take up any tools or any resources to help the cause still has to go forward regardless. If you decide from there on in not to play for that team because you're a black person or because of how they handle it, so I don't expect that from an organization. You just, some statements, like the University of Minnesota, Justin was mentioning, I appreciate the fact that they had nothing to lose or whatever, and they issued a statement saying that they will no longer tolerate certain things and they're not aligning themselves with the Minnesota police. But you know what? That really don't mean nothing to me, because at the end of the day, you do or do not, we still need to evoke change. You stopping the Minnesota police from running security at your games and at your university, not making any change. Yes, it is a statement that you do not that you're condemning the actions of their department, and that is fine. But at the end of the day, this is about changing policy, changing mentality, right?
So I want to ask Neil, then, don't you feel, let us say for argument's sake, and I agree with you to a point, because I do agree that it is our responsibility as black people, whether it be whatever level you are, it's our responsibility.
Not only the responsibility of black people, but the American people. Let us get this straight. Because black people make up 12.6% of the American population, while white people make up just over 72%. But don't let us get it twisted. 12%, 37 million Americans are not going to change the ideologies of a country of 350 million people.
Oh, agree. But I want to ask you, Neil, maybe I use the words wrong and not responsibility, but let us say Jaylen Brown leading 30,000 people in Atlanta. Do you think that has the same impact as, let us say, as I said, the University of Minnesota? Or sorry, let's say the University of Minnesota, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Minnesota Twins, the Minnesota Lynx, the Minnesota Vikings. Let's say all 5 or 6 of those entities together said, we no longer want anything to do with that police department. You will no longer require your services. Furthermore, we are going to totally distance ourselves from you. I believe that those 5 or 6 sporting organizations and their decisions will have a greater impact on what they decide to do within their community than any single black athlete, whether it be from as high as LeBron James right down to Jaylen Brown. I honestly believe that the impact that they will have will be more resounding, will be more impactful than any one athlete, any one entertainer, any one celebrity.
So I disagree. And this is why I disagree, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not about the Minnesota Police Department. It is not.
But I mean, sorry.
Hold on.
I mean, in that scenario. But I agree.
No.
In that scenario.
In the end, this is what I mean about people losing sight of what the ultimate goal is. All of these organizations could come together and say, we will not utilize the services of the Minnesota Police Department and distance themselves. What if a month from now, someone else is murdered by the... Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Yes, one athlete, one entertainer cannot get it done. One black person cannot get it done, right? That is why I'm saying every person with a platform and voice must give whatever they can for as long as they can in the attempt to invoke change.
I'm completely with you, Neil.
This is not about the Minnesota Police Department.
No, but
because watch. Hold on. Because if all 4 of those police officers are arrested, right, and that completely eliminates racial profiling and that kind of thing from the Minnesota Police Department, what about Atlanta?
So then we talk about Atlanta next.
What about Philadelphia?
But I'm
what
saying
about
that,
Boston?
Neil, and I agree with you, right? But does that not start the change then, Neil? If those
Justin, but the argument is not The argument is not if that doesn't contribute to the change. It doesn't start it.
No,
It does not start it. You know what starts the change? You know what starts the change? Going out and marching in the streets. Letting people know that we've had enough. Having peaceful protests.
But we
trust me when I tell you, hold on a minute, Justin, hold on. Because in Minnesota, I do not see the Minnesota Timberwolves. In Minnesota, I do not see the University of Minnesota. In Minnesota, I do not see the Minnesota Lynx. I do not see the Minnesota Vikings when I see the march. When in Philadelphia, I don't see the 76ers. I see black people and white people trying to create change. That is what I see. I don't see organizations.
But I hear
if they want to, hold on, if they want to help, that is fine. If they want to lend their support by doing what they think is right, that is fine. But whether they do or whether they don't, it still needs to be done. They're not the most important cog in that machine.
I hear you, Neil. But my thing is, you have to get something. You have to get victory somewhere. You have to start the wheel somewhere. And
but that's the point I'm trying to make. They're not starting the wheel.
Neil, let him make his point.
And the problem is, Neil, is that we have been peacefully protesting for centuries. But we've been peacefully protesting for decades. And we have not seen change. We agreed not to mention a particular release that came right before the show, but we peacefully protested and look what happened.
No, but hold on, but look,
hold on,
not to cross you, but to be fair, we are being lumped in with those that are not peacefully protesting and being opportunistic.
But I'm saying, let us say for argument's sake, those 6 same professional entities I just called, force change within that one department. Doesn't that count for something? Because when that department changes, then the departments all across the United States have to start checking themselves, because they say, well, if that happens here, that can happen in Atlanta, that can happen in New York. And let us say for argument's sake, unfortunately, let me knock on wood, that somebody is killed at the hands of police in Atlanta. And then the Hawks and the Falcons do the same thing in Atlanta and force them to change. Doesn't that count for something, Neil?
No, again.
But doesn't that move it forward?
No. We are arguing two different things. You made a statement saying that the organizations are more important.
Well, sorry, I should say. I believe that the organizations wield a greater power because of the economic strength. Because just remember,
I don't agree.
And Marsha brought this point to me. Remember why slavery ended in the 1800s? It started to become not as economically viable for these slave owners, for Britain and Spain to carry forward with it. When those organizations band together and start to put economic pressure, and we all know that money is at the root of everything, money and power and control. When these organizations, which have the economic power to put a stranglehold on certain institutions, then I believe change will really come. We have marched, we have peacefully protested. Now we have gone to rioting, to looting, and not peacefully protesting. And now orders have come. So it shows me, and I'm not saying that we're not supposed to do these things, because I am in favor of a lot of things. And so I said I'm not in favor. But we have tried these means for decades now, and they have not worked. So right. I am in favor of those 5 or 6 Minnesota sporting organizations to put economic and social pressure, because I believe that will have a greater impact than anything we do on the streets.
No, I am really glad that you specified what you meant.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I still don't agree, because at the end of the day, again, I'm going to point out that disassociating yourself from the Minnesota Police Department is a step in the right direction, and it is a contribution. It is not the most important thing to evoking change in the overall cog. No, you're asking businesses, and I agree with you on the fact that if businesses were to hold the US government accountable and the system accountable and evoke change by not spending their money certain places and not allowing certain things to take place and like lending their voice and money to certain things, then I do agree that a change can happen. And it may be more important than one subsect of the Black community. But Justin, the truth of the matter is that, again, America is made up of 72% white America on a system that is with no consideration for the Black person. Therefore, businesses will be afraid to align themselves wholeheartedly to dismantling the system that has created such wealth for the entire system, because white people are the majority of the people in the United States. Look at what happened when Nike supported Colin Kaepernick. White people bring out all the main products and say they're boycotting Nike. Right? No, Nike didn't care, obviously, because, you know, but the problem is not every business thinks like that. And 72% of spending power in a country versus 12% is a lot. So to be honest, we cannot rely on and we cannot depend on businesses and organizations to get it done. If they help, fine. If they move the conversation forward, fine. But it can't start with them. We can't depend on them because their money is not, it's not from us.
This is where I sit on this. And it's kind of in the middle of you all, leaning toward Justin, because at the end of the day, this is a systemic, institutional, years-long problem that will not be erased overnight. And the battle will not be won at the grassroots level. The battle will be won among the movers, the shakers, the policy makers. And that is where I think that organizations now have a role to play. If organizations are beholden to their stakeholders with athletes and the communities they are operate in, making up those stakeholder groups, and from the grassroots level have athletes and community members, etc., putting pressure on organizations, because organizations can enact policy change faster than 20,000 people on the street, whether we like to admit it, let it or not. So when it comes to, first, for me, the role of the organization starts with institutional change. Before you can fix anything on the outside, you have to look within. And that is why the NFL, for me, you're an organization that requires a Rooney Rule. What could you be telling people about imbalances and injustices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So fix your house first.
Not just because a Rooney Rule, Marsha, then subsequent amendments to the Rooney Rule.
Amendments to a Rooney Rule. So for me, the role of the organization is multi-tiered. You have that internal / institutional change that needs to take place. You have then your impact at the level of policy, because whether we like to, do not underestimate the role that major franchises and the impact major franchises have on major cities, where you see something as simple. If a franchise leaves, sometimes that entire ecosystem collapses.
I agree.
Therein lies
I want to add to that. You remember a particular year, I can't remember which city, I think it was Charlotte, because I want to be very particular with this. The NBA threatened to take the All-Star game away from Charlotte because of their...
it was the protests they had. Yeah.
And look what happened. So that's why you see, Neil, sporting organizations wield way more power than any of us. I agree with you, Neil. Yes, it is incumbent on us to get the ball rolling.
But you attack from multiple points. It is not one or the other. Everything works in tandem.
And that's the point I'm trying to make. Justin said that the organizations and entities were the most important. And while I do agree they are important for invoking change, we still have to remember that this is a society that is 72% white.
And
so now when you have
white
organizations,
and that's why organizations wield more power.
But the majority of people that go to games are white. So now if you come up with a policy or you come up with a statement, or you come up with a movement that the majority of your fan base, which is white, boycotts, you lose money.
But
We
therein
all
lies the
know,
difference. You
but
can't sit here and say the majority of the fan base boycott such a movement
Because our
simply
opinion,
because they're white.
you
all I'm saying,
you brought up
hold
a
on.
poignant point.
The only thing I'm saying here is that I agree that it is an important cog. It is an important part of the reason for things to happen. I even think that it is in an ideal world, it would be the most important. But I'm saying that the likelihood of that happening and the likelihood of them using their power, this has been going on for centuries. They've had, hold on. They've had institutions around for centuries. And we have protested peacefully. We have protested violently. We have protested in every which way possible. We've ran from slave owners. We have went to civil war because of slavery. We've done all of these things. Yet all of these entities still remain quiet. So in 2020, I do not see that the leaders of these entities and organizations can suddenly wake up and decide, you know what? Enough is enough.
But hold on.
Simply because they spending money.
But we're seeing the needle
is where the money goes.
We're starting to see needle move, and you brought up a point that I think supports me. You brought up Nike and their support of Colin Kaepernick. Now, when they first came up with that campaign, I honestly thought that they were going to lose money. But Nike knew already that their target market is going to support the move.
And that's the point.
Behind it. And so that's what I'm saying.
It was a calculated move. It was a calculated move.
It was a very calculated move.
Don't feel that.
Hold on here. So hear me out now. Nike knew where the needle was going. They knew what the growing trend was. So they knew that they were never at risk of losing any market share when they supported Colin Kaepernick, to the point where, as we saw, the first week or so, market share went like sky high. They skyrocketed. The profits were out. I don't think in any point in Nike's history did they ever make the profits that they did in that first week of the Colin Kaepernick campaign. Now you are seeing a situation where every single entity, every single company is coming out in support. I do think now, so going back to Nike point, I do think
not to cross you, Justin. Hold on. Not to cross you, Justin. But what is that support that all of these companies are coming up with?
Hold on, like as you said, a lot of it is posturing, as we know. So It's just a lot of hold on. So it's just a lot of press releases, a lot of, I don't want to say gaff, but a lot of public posturing. But in that, if they are doing their market research, I'm quite sure they are looking at their social media platforms and seeing the amount of support that these releases are garnering. If there is a time for these organizations to put pressure and end systemic racism, I think it is no.
You think Walmart? Hold on. Walmart.
I think it is no.
Walmart is the biggest company in the United States. You see Walmart aligning themselves with this movement to evoke change?
Well, for the purposes of this discussion, we're talking about sport. So if we move into business, if we move into traditional business, that opens up a whole other rabbit hole.
Fine. Let's keep it with sports then. Do you think the Dallas Cowboys will do anything substantial to align themselves to evoke change at the government level?
I can't sit here and say I know or don't know what happens in the boardroom. What I can tell you though, if the community and the constituents and the stakeholders of the Dallas Cowboys, the sponsors of the Dallas Cowboys, make certain representation, things will change.
A lot of things have, but you see.
Go ahead, Marsha.
This is why we can't look at this as black and white. We can't look at this in silos or absolutes. When you're dealing with a systemic institutional problem like this, you've got to look at the role of the family. What are you teaching people inside of their house? The role of the community. The organization has a massive role to play, particularly when it comes to policy development. And think about something like if we go global, institutions like the IOC and FIFA have so much power when it comes to bans,
but hold on,
sanctions.
that's the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that Racism in these sports have been happening for decades, if not centuries, right? And these entities have always had the power, right? And they have done nothing or very little.
Agreed,
Hold
Neil,
on,
but
hold
I
on,
think
hold
no.
on, hold on.
Wait, no, just to
hold
stick a
on.
pin there. Increasingly, for example, at the level of FIFA and UEFA, you have seen that their hand has been forced. They've been forced to put the sanctions, forced to institute the fines, forced to
Right.
institute the bans. So
But you
we
said
are in a better position than we
but you
are.
said but you said what you said. They were forced.
And
I'm
that is the
saying,
point I'm trying to make. Hold
And
on,
that's
Neil.
what
What
we're
I'm
trying to
trying to
tell you,
say
Neil.
is everything comes together. So don't look at it in isolation.
And that is the point I am trying to make, is that there are a lot of things that have to happen and fall in place for all of these entities in sports and wherever to band together to say, yo, you know what? You know what it takes for a sporting entity to really change and support a black community if they don't want to, and to invoke change? You have to ask all of their stakeholders to apply pressure on them to get things done. And I'm saying that that is a lot that has to happen and that you have to depend on for them to be the important step in this movement. And I'm saying,
hold on, Neil. I just think that they have to start seeing the fact that it may not be economically viable to continue this way. And they say that when you look at a lot of these protests, you're seeing, and I am shocked and stunned, how many white people have been not just involved at the forefront. We have seen, I'm quite sure, the viral video that came out of Louisville with a whole host of white women banded together to protect black people from the police standing in between them. A lot of these riots, a lot of these protests have been led by white people. And I'm trying to say,
by white millennials. Millennials. Don't get it twisted. Not all white man with spending power, middle-aged man out there protecting people. Let me be careful now.
And who do you think eventually is taking over this world, Neil? White millennials.
But that's the point I'm trying. Hold on. But Justin, that's the point I'm trying to make. That is 20, 30 years removed.
I don't think so, Neil, because hold on. Who is going to have the spending power within 10 years? The same white millennials. And who are you targeting as your audience going forward?
So what do we do in 10 years, Justin? But the point I'm trying to make is, what do we do in 10 years? Whenever that generation takes over. Hold on.
Organization comes to play, Neil, because the same people who I need now to purchase my tickets, to purchase my memorabilia, are the same white millennials are coming up now. So eventually, once it becomes...
Eventually, I'm going by the statement you made. The statement you made is that for anything to change, the organizations and the stakeholders and the powers that be are the most important to get change to happen now.
Neil, he did clarify himself and say not necessarily the most important, but they have to be a major part.
But they have a major part.
No. That clarification was made.
Listen. Okay, then I agree with you. I agree with you all in the fact that we will need, it can take everybody, it can take all hands on deck to change the way things are done in the system. The system has to be, I don't even think it has to be restructured. I feel as though it has to be dismantled and start from scratch peacefully. I can keep saying peacefully because I don't condone violence, right? I am just saying that
other than when you're playing basketball against Justin Bro.
That's different. That's war. But the point I'm trying to make here is that this story so many times in history. We've seen it. And every time pressure is laxed off. The entities and the organizations, they're in it for the PR and the marketing. They want to make sure that they're not seen in a bad light, and then everything dies down. And I'm not even condoning just organizations. I'm condoning even the black community as well, right?
So then isn't the onus on us then as people? Because we as people can get hot and sweaty.
And that is the point I'm trying to make.
People on their own cannot effect change.
But that's the point I'm trying to make. We have to keep the pressure on. We have to keep the pressure on as people. And I think we are the most important, because if we keep applying the pressure and we keep saying, you know what, we will not allow this, and we keep protesting and we keep talking with our wallets and stuff like that, the stakeholders ain't got no choice but to change. And then that is where their part comes in now and helps to move forward that part of it.
So I
I'm
don't want
saying
us to
it
get
starts
caught up in semantics over most important versus least important,
right.
because that can, that can start to sway
Yeah.
things if you're essentially saying the same thing. So
Right.
we
Yeah.
can
But I
all
mean,
agree
Yeah.
then,
I can
Yeah.
tell
we
you
can
now,
all
Neil,
agree then that there's a role to play for every
not just,
aspect.
I'm going to
Yeah.
say this
But
now, Marsha and Neil, and it is from what I've started to realize. I think, yeah, we've saying this for centuries. I think change is going to come eventually. And the reason why is because when things start to become economically or no longer economically viable, then you have to change. And all it's going to take, Neil, right? Or not all, sorry, not make it sound small issue. When these white millennials, as you correctly said, start coming up and start putting the economic pressure on these organizations will change. And not because their hearts or their minds are changing, but because it is no longer economically viable to continue with systemic racism.
And just for a point of clarification, the oldest millennial is 38 right now. So we tend to think of millennials as 50-year-olds. They're not.
Right.
Me, I don't know about y'all. I
Yes, you.
well into the age group of a millennial. So just to add some context to that, we're not waiting on a 22-year-old, a 21-year-old,
no, no,
a
no, 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 no,
20-year-old
no.
Right.
to come to
No.
the fore.
To me, I actually believe it comes down to policymakers, right? I think that I do agree with you, Justin. That the old guard will be replaced. The old guard is really what is perpetuating the systemic racism and oppression,
And we're
right?
seeing a change right now, Neil.
And
When you look at the NBA, right, because they have younger, more forward-thinking owners, you are seeing how much of a forward-thinking association of the NBA is as opposed to the NFL, and it's not by accident or coincidence.
The NBA is having a virtual town hall this Wednesday as well on the
Yeah.
same issue.
So, and it's because of the age of their owners. As
No,
opposed to when you look at the NFL owners who are of that.
old and white. I agree with you, Justin. Again, I think what we got caught up in before is the semantics of who is the most important in right now. But I do agree that the old guard will change, and the younger generation they've been raised a lot differently and seen some things. So I think we have to kind of hold on until the policymakers. But I'm saying in the meantime, the grassroots got to keep the chains rattling and got to keep the megaphones on and keep the protests going, because if it keeps dying down and these things keep happening, and we can keep losing lives. So we can't let people forget. We can't let people get lackadaisical. We can't let people say, "Oh,
I'm glad you brought it up, Neil. I think also the reason why I feel that organizations are very important at this point, especially those 5-6 that I mentioned previously in Minnesota. There are two things, as you correctly mentioned. One, I think there's an importance, the need right now, and let me coach my language very carefully. I think we have to get some of the not so peaceful riots to stop, and hear me out. And the reason is, I fear that lives are going to be lost. And I say that because the more violent the protests come, the more justified that the old guard you just mentioned are going to feel in how they treat us. So they're going to say, well, look how they react to how they're getting. And we've seen situations where outside entities for their own purposes have been escalating the situation to justify whatever is to come. And we have seen tonight what is coming. So that is one thing. We need to get the rioters off the street because we are justifying how they feel. I mean, personally, I have a different view, but I'll leave that for off the show. But I want to avoid further loss of life. But second and most importantly, we seem to forget that COVID-19 is out there. And with all these rioters, protesters in a tight space, you are now, as we work so hard to flatten the curve, now we are only endangering ourselves for the further spread of coronavirus by having these people out there in uncertain and unsafe times. And that is why I feel that organizations are so impactful, because right now, and I agree with you, Neil, the conversation just can't be, we need the three other officers, along with the officer that had his knee on the guy's neck. We need the three others to be arrested as well, charged, and eventually sentenced for murder. We need all four of those.
First-degree murder.
For murder. But that cannot be just it. But we know the riots will not stop unless that happens. And I think the fastest way to get that happen, Neil, is for those 6 Minnesota-based organizations to put pressure immediately on the department and the DA's office. I do not see things changing in that scenario any other way, to be quite honest.
I agree. I think that, so in the midst of COVID-19, I feel as though that COVID-19 is secondary compared to what's going on, but I think the only way to help not stop the movement or to quell people, but to kind of get them to go back into quarantine and isolate. Right now, I don't even know if that would help because so many people have been on the streets for so many days, but regardless, I think that the officers being arrested would help to alleviate some of that frustration and some of that anger. I don't know if it will stop the protests because I think right now the United States, certain events over the last 4 years, or shoot, not even 4 years, the last 8 years have led to this. From the death of Trayvon Martin to all of those people, men and women, have lost their lives at the hands of police, to all the people that have been treated differently in the judicial system versus white people, then the election of the president and his views and the way he goes about governing. I feel as though this was inevitable, and I don't know if it will stop the riots. I don't know if it will stop the protesting. But I think right now on people's minds, this is far more important than COVID-19. I think most people feel as though whether you lose your lives to COVID-19 or you lose your lives protesting with the deployment of the military or police or whomever, death is regarded. But everybody sees this as a part of history, and everybody wants to be on the right side of history. So,
I think that's...
Sorry. I didn't talk about the NFL. I won't talk about the NFL. I think the NFL, right? I literally wrestled since I heard that statement. I was like, yo, should I boycott the NFL? Should I really not just mess with the NFL anymore and never talk with the NFL again? And I'm still on the fence because I cannot believe whoever does work in the marketing and PR for the NFL, I don't know if they're being held at gunpoint. I don't know if they are afraid for their lives. I don't even know if they want to do it, be there or whatever. But that statement, I would have rather them say nothing.
Agreed. I
would have rather them say nothing than them issue that statement in light of all they have tried to do to suppress the peaceful protests that Colin Kaepernick and others have tried to do.
But to be fair, for me to play devil's advocate here, there is a school of thought, and I've heard this from multiple journalists, that there is a disconnect between the owners and the league office that is Roger Goodell. And remember, we have seen that because we've heard rumors that they tried to get him fired about
there has to be a disconnect. There has to be a disconnect.
So, in that, there is a school of thought that Roger Goodell is not in approval of the way Colin Kaepernick was treated, and the NFL turning a blind eye to the social injustices going on in America. And just remember, the press release, whether it was directly written by or not, the press release came from Roger Goodell's office. So I get you, and I feel the same way, Neil. But again, to be fair, it could be that Roger Goodell understands what is going on, understands where the NFL should be, and he may be indeed in a battle against the NFL owners, that same old guard that we've been talking about.
No, just to wrap up this part, I know, Justin, you didn't have to tell me that there's a disconnect. It is clear that statement, making it to the public, shows a level of disconnect over the last 4 years, and no, clearly, right? And I know exactly where the disconnect comes from, right? It is just a sad the NFL and that entire league is the way it is. And it is unfortunate that boycotting NFL games will be much harder to do than any other major sport in the United States. I just want to say that the NFL needs to, if you're talking about organization that needs to change in sports, since we're only talking about sports, I feel the NFL needs to, that is, to me, the representation of the overall system of the United States. And I feel as though if we can start in sports to clean up house, to be representative of the overall society, start with the NFL, because that's a PR nightmare.
10, 15 years, Neil, they're all old.
No, right? I patiently waiting, you know. Let me tell you, I waiting patiently.
And I think that's a good point for us to wrap up on tonight. We accept that, you know what, there is a role for both the Black athletes in general, and sporting organizations to play in the fight against racial injustice, racism, and any social injustice for that matter. Throughout history, we've seen the role sport has played in effecting change, whether you go from the apartheid system in South Africa and you come forward, you see the role sport in terms of public pressure at certain commercial pressure, sanctions, bans, policy development. There's so much that can be done, and the onus is on us, the individual, not only to do our part on an individual basis, but to put pressure on our community leaders, our politicians, our sporting organizations, wherever we spend our money and our time. The onus is on us to put pressure on those entities to exert change. I just want to wrap up with one of my favorite quotes from Nelson Mandela. It is one that is often heard, but there is power and truth in these words. Sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. So as we leave here tonight, let us hold on to that and think what we can do within because while we put the spotlight on the USA, nowhere is perfect. And we might have, wherever you may be watching in the world, communities. Mm-hmm. But I think with this being at the forefront, we can all agree that as it relates to racism in the USA and racial injustice, there is an issue, and sport does indeed have a role to play in overcoming this issue. That's it for us here tonight. I'm Marsha Boyce.
I'm Mr. Marvel.
And I'm Neil Hoyt.
And thank you for joining us on this Just In. Be sure to join us on Instagram coming up this Thursday for what is, I am certain, to be a heated mailbag on Instagram Live. We will probably
impassionate.
We will probably be continuing our discussion on this issue, and there you can pose all of your questions, all of your comments. In fact, if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them right here in the comment section of this video. Check us out on Twitter, here on Facebook, YouTube, and of course on Instagram, and we'll see you on Thursday.
All right, good night, everybody.